All right. Looks like we are live and recording.
Yep, we're in action.
Fantastic. So I'm going to share my screen.
Okay.
And if anyone has trouble seeing this throughout the presentation, just please let me know. And we can stop and adjust however we might need. 1 second here to get set up. All right.
Is everyone able to see Jordan's screen?
Yes.
Yes, I can.
Yes.
Affirm.
Jody here. Hi.
Calling in on a cell phone, but I'll be able to follow.
Fantastic. Most of the presentation part is visuals to help kind of capture some of the things I'm saying. Hopefully I'll communicate all my points clearly via audio. So
Okay.
those of you who are calling in. So I'll kick things off. Thank you all for being here. I'm super excited to talk to you all a little bit about the role that I have here in Northwest Arkansas, and also share a few insights that I have as a startup founder who is working in building our startup community here. And so the way that I'm going to frame today's talk is Northwest Arkansas is a rocket ship. So if anyone is familiar with how venture capital about making their investment, thinking about how they will find deals that give them alpha in a portfolio. Venture capital is a business of home runs. Give me 1 second. I may have to mute the group here because we got some feedback coming in. Let's see. I'm going to mute all except for myself. Okay. All right. All right. So, the analogy goes: venture capitalists look for home runs. So things that return a 10x multiple or more, and more often than not, those things can either work out wonderfully or they can fail. But one of the things that the best investors look for are contrarian ideas that most people don't find super obvious that could turn out to be really, really big. And so my case today is how Northwest Arkansas is one of those communities, and how you should consider it as a place where if you want to start a company, it's one of the best places to do so right now in this moment. And this moment is actually a really, really special and unique time for that as well. So a little bit of backstory on this region. I have a picture here of Sam Walton in a hula skirt as he's celebrating on Wall Street when when Walmart beat his earnings report, or Walmart beat their earnings report in the late 80s. And that was around the same time that Walmart's really started to take off and become hold on 1 second, let me make sure I get this, become a dominant presence in the retail world, and really started to make a name for itself internationally as well. Hold on 1 second, I got a chat coming through here. I'm gonna make sure everybody can hear. But so to continue on, the region of Northwest Arkansas has been built around this rich legacy of what Sam Walton built. So as Walmart continued to grow and become the world's largest retailer and one of the largest companies in the world, and one of the largest employers in the world, only behind the US government and China, we can peer into this and look at how he was able to accomplish that. And that was through the philosophy of everyday low prices, which begets the strategy of keeping everything very Spartan and everything very low cost. And up until about a decade and a half ago, Northwest Arkansas really reflected that from a community standpoint. When you lived here and worked in the industries that thrived here, it embodied the values that trickled down from the corporate culture of Walmart. And that was a successful strategy, say 20 years ago. And you have companies like Tyson Foods, who is one of the world's largest protein producers, and JB Hunt, who is the third largest logistics company in the country, or third-party logistics company in the country. That strategy worked really well for those companies. And all three of those companies are still Fortune 500 companies today, and Walmart still maintaining that Fortune 1 spot. However, one of the things that has really changed that we're only starting to see come to full fruition right now is that the strategy for today to keep that everyday low cost is not to keep absolute costs as minimal as possible. You have to hire the talent to be able to engineer the systems that enable scale and growth on a global level. And so that key point is really important to consider as we move forward, because a lot of the things I'm going to share with you today about the investments that are being made into this community are strategically aligned with the future of these larger corporations. And all of this is trickling down into the rest of the economy in Northwest Arkansas. So before we go further, I do want to talk a little bit about my story, because I do think it's important to relate to on a founder to founder level. So maybe some of you are repeat entrepreneurs, or maybe some of you are just beginning your entrepreneurial journey. Regardless, there are some unique challenges that come with being a founder. And I want to make sure to establish kind of a presence for my role in this community as a founder. So like I mentioned, my name is Jordan Carlisle, and I have been a startup community builder in the Northwest Arkansas and Greater Arkansas region for about 7 years, give or take 7 or 8 years. And it all started when I moved back from graduating from the University of Missouri with an appetite for entrepreneurship by competing in events called Startup Weekends. And I was obsessed with these events. I would go to them anytime I could find a chance to, in cities like Kansas City, St. Louis, Columbia, Missouri, Des Moines, Iowa. And when I moved back to Arkansas, there really wasn't a lot going on about 8 years ago. And that was somewhat frustrating, because I was hoping to break into the tech world, but I had my own ideas, and I needed mentors. I needed potential funding, and I needed to learn what it took to grow my business and find customers and continue to grow it. And so when I got back and I couldn't find a lot of activity going on, I decided, okay, why not start my own community? Why not build the community that I want to be in? And so I started hosting startup weekends in both Fayetteville, Arkansas, and Little Rock, Arkansas. And through that experience, I started connecting with all of the people who really, really cared about seeing startup entrepreneurship thrive in the state of Arkansas. And at the time, there were really only a few organizations that were really prioritizing that, and only one that was dedicated on focusing to help startup entrepreneurs. And that organization was called Innovate Arkansas. And so as we started to host these events, we noticed that there was a huge appetite from the community to gain some type of entrepreneurial support. And so you had these fantastic entrepreneurs that competed in startup weekends that ended up starting companies that got traction and got funding. And these startup weekend events were really easy to run. And so there was a kind of a hypothesis that we had where we felt like there was a pent-up energy for entrepreneurial talent in the state that just needed access to resources for them to really thrive. And that started to take effect as we saw some of the companies that participated in the event grow to 100, 200 plus people that they're employing now today. So as I went through this journey hosting these events, I unexpectedly fell into economic development as somebody who was just passionate about trying to grow the startup community. After that experience, I was a co-founder of an incubator called the Venture Center, which primarily focuses on accelerating financial technology companies in partnership with FIS Global. And after about 3 years of doing that, I stepped out to start my own software company, which is called Strengthen. And Strengthen builds software for health coaches to run wellness programs for small businesses. We also own part of a gym where we do in-person training, and we have a staff of about 8 health coaches and a team of 4 that builds our software. And as a startup founder in the state, what's really interesting to take note of is that when I began my journey, there were not very many resources that I could take advantage of. And I had to put myself back into a community builder role before I could actually start a company because I wasn't getting the necessary resources that I needed. And one of the questions that I always had was, if we live in a state where you have these super successful enterprises and families that have the resources and capacity to potentially move the needle in a significant way, and creating programs and funding that can help startups. And if startups are such an important part of our economy, why aren't we doing something? And so this was about 8 years ago. And at the time, there wasn't a lot of activity from corporate engagement. The Walton Family Foundation was doing some investment into supporting entrepreneurship, but it was on a national level. It was not on a local level, focused on trying to grow in their home region. And so there just wasn't a lot going on. And as somebody who was trying to build this community, I kept asking myself, like, it could be so easy for some of these groups to really make a huge impact and not be that significant to them. So fast forward, and so that was around 2013, 2014. And now we live in a place where it's absolutely booming. We have one of the most dynamic metros in the entire country. So among mid-sized metros, the Northwest Arkansas region, it ranks number 2. And this is a statistic that factors in things like GDP, quality of life, access to healthcare, and job growth. And then if we look at metros as a whole, so comparing ourselves to bigger metros like even San Francisco and New York, we rank 17th overall in terms of growth. And then another interesting thing is if we look at per capita income, we rank 9th overall across all metro regions, which is very, very strong for a region that has such a low cost of living. And I threw an objection in here. So on the 4th dot here, we rank number 191 in young firm employment ratio. And when I dug into this data was actually from 2015. And so I thought that was important to include because 2015 actually predates a lot of the things that I'm about to show you in terms of what's been happening in Northwest Arkansas. And I think that if we looked at that young firm employment ratio, that is probably the number one ratio that this whole community is amped up and fired up about to try to change and really move the needle on. And so we went from in 2013 and 2014 to having one organization named Innovate Arkansas that was doing entrepreneurial support work to now what I'll get into is a plethora of entrepreneurial support organizations that have all been started over the past 5 years. And I'm not going to spend too much time digging into what each of these organizations does because Jeanette Bailey-Collins from the Northwest Arkansas Council is going to do another video for the Scale Challenge that will cover these things in more depth. But I do want to just give you a picture of the volume and the amount of support that's going on. So we have Startup Junkie, which is a almost like an SBA for startups. 1 Million Cups, which is a weekly entrepreneurial program. Grit Studios, which is mentorship and co-working. The Exchange is a co-working space that's hosted by Walmart. Endeavor Entrepreneurs, which is a global program that connects scale-ups into a big ecosystem of mentors. Plug and Play, which if you're in Silicon Valley, has a huge presence in terms of acceleration and helping scale-ups continue to grow. The Scale Challenge, which all of you are very well familiar with. The Fuel Accelerator, which is started off as a supply chain and logistics accelerator that partners with Walmart, Tyson, and JB Hunt. They are now listening to their customers and hearing that there's actually a higher demand for AI startups. And so the Fuel Accelerator is now recruiting companies that are at a scale-up enterprise-ready position that are enabled by AI in some capacity that can benefit the supply chain and logistics world. And the page continues. So Innovate Arkansas, like I mentioned, the Builders Program, which is an accelerator that actually happens in Israel, but the founders get immediate access to Walmart, and so they come and plug into our community here. Venture Noir, which is a program that I am particularly really proud of because I helped build it with the group that is coming in. This is a program that helps founders of color who are working in the CPG world and CPG technology world. And they have, Venture Noir has pilot offices in Brooklyn, New York, and Los Angeles, California, where those places are acting as a siphon to help pull in all this talent that has innovative ideas in terms of CPG and leveraging the relationships with Walmart and all of the 400 Fortune 500 companies that are here building up those brands. We have University of Arkansas's Macmillan Innovation Studio, which is a student incubator. We have Startup Weekends, which is a TechStars program. We typically have 2 of those a year, and that's a really fantastic way to help people get ideas off the ground, like I mentioned earlier. The Delta I Fund, or the I Fund, is a Windrock International program that is based on the I-Core model for startup validation and business model development. The Innovation Hub, which is Makerspace, and the Conductor. Okay, so that was a mouthful, but let me just back up for a second. We went from one organization that was helping startups to 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16 organizations that have staff ready to help and scale up entrepreneurs in this region. And each of those organizations has their own set of supporters that are interested in watching and helping and supporting startups growing in our region. So if we're going back to our investor narrative, typically investors look for companies that have achieved product market fit. So when a company has achieved product market fit, they know that their customers are pulling at them, wanting things, wanting their products and services faster than they can probably supply it. And what I'll say about Northwest Arkansas is that in that same way, Northwest Arkansas has evolved from a place where it was very uphill push battle, and it was tough to really spark startup community building overall, to overnight becoming a place that has this tremendous support for entrepreneurs over the past 5 years that's developed. And everyone from the corporations, the universities, the grassroots entrepreneurs who have been in the front line building their companies, and benefactors like the Walton family, the Tyson family, and the Hunt family are all bought into this vision collectively to build one of the best startup ecosystems in the entire country. And that's why we have so much of this support. Does anybody have any questions before we go further? And I'm sorry if someone's messaging in the chat. Okay, I had a question. Are you based in Arkansas? So yes, I am based in Bentonville, Arkansas. Sorry for not clarifying that.
Hey Jordan, it's Peter in New York. I'm actually on the Zoom with you. So my question is, of all these different groups that are helping, it's just the funding side. So many, I probably work with about 30 startups now, and each one of them in one stage or another needs some help on a capital raise.
Mm-hmm.
So out of these groups, what specifically would help them? As you know, Steve Case, he talks about startups. He talks about there's plenty of funding in New York and in Northern California, but in the Midwest and likely Arkansas, there's a lack of funding. So can you talk about that?
Yeah, so unfortunately, the data on that would corroborate your point there. If we looked at venture capital as a whole, I believe the statistic is that between New York, Massachusetts, and California, 80% of all venture capital in the U.S. was deployed there. And then if you look at the Heartland region specifically, it's because if you look at Texas actually would probably be the next state that receives the most. Then the Heartland region really only gets about, I think, 5% of that venture capital investment. And so, to your point, Steve Case, runs this program, The Rise of the Rest, with the mission of investing in entrepreneurs in the belief that because there's access to more resources and there's this talent that is in the heartland. Go ahead.
Just type.
Yes, hi. This is John McKellen from New York. If you can hear me, I thought I'd just share a story that might be useful to the group, an experience I had in Arkansas going back about 20 years ago. But I live in New York now. I'm originally from the South, but I was in Northwest Arkansas on an earlier freight startup, and I was meeting with J.B. Hunt, who headed up J.B. Hunt, of course. And over lunch, I was just commenting to him. I said, Mr. Hunt, what's the reason for the extraordinary success of all these companies, your company and other companies in Northwest Arkansas? Obviously Walmart, but Tyson Foods was mentioned. I think Tyson actually has the single best stock record over the last 4 decades of any company. But in any case, I asked him, I said, how would you explain this extraordinary success? And he paused and then immediately said, well, we have a lot of solid, hardworking people. But the most important thing, he thinks in addition to that, he said that we help each other. There's a kind of a common effort. Everybody's kind of pushing in the same direction and, working towards common goal. And that's always stuck with me. And also, obviously, you're in the shadow of the university. Doesn't have as good a football team as it used to have, but there's a lot of excitement with that. So I just, I've lived in New York for the past 40 years, but I was raised in the South, and I know parts of it, but and been to later in my career to Walmart's office many times to sell it, and it's just a wonderful group of people. But I do think that spirit of kind of working together and helping each other, in addition to be hardworking, and all of these companies, I think got where they were by people that kind of had a shared view and focused on having a better mousetrap. So that's my 2 cents that I throw.
Thank you for that. Thank you for that.
Hey there, Jordan. This is Lisa Hallabo.
Hey, how's it going?
Good. I have a question regarding building up this ecosystem here. I know in a perfect world, Walmart and Walton family would have all of these startups move to Bentonville and set up their headquarters there. But as we know, having built ecosystems for startups here in New York and Puerto Rico and DC, and these startups really need the ecosystem that they were born in to get to a certain scale before they can relocate. So how are you thinking about that as far as the stage of companies and how you are requiring them to move out of the ecosystem that gave birth to them?
Yeah, so that's a really interesting question. I think to dive deeper into that, we have to think about what the definition of birth is. So I think you could think about it from a pregnancy standpoint. If you're in that incubation phase, maybe you haven't built a product yet. Maybe you haven't really formed a team. You're a solo founder. I don't think that the origin point from where you're from is as important. It probably does have an impact in terms of your network and your ability to quickly get access to things in that ecosystem. But I think if you're moving somewhere that's specifically geared towards the industry that you're participating in, so for example, in Northwest Arkansas, it might be supply chain. I think that it's not as critical that you maintain a presence where you are originally from. Now, I do agree with you that once you do start building that initial core team and you have maybe 3 to 10 employees, it would be extremely difficult to uproot everyone and move them to a new location. However, I think you can look at it from a strategic officing standpoint and set up a client relationship management office for maybe your contract, if you get a contract with Walmart or some of the vendors here, or what have you. And that's actually something we see that's very common. And I'm going to touch on this a little bit later. I have a few more slides to go through once we get through some of these questions. But we actually have a really thriving co-working space ecosystem here, because there's so many companies that have offices for servicing the big companies here. And so we actually have 400 Fortune 500 companies with permanent offices in Northwest Arkansas just to service their business with the existing homegrown ecosystem that's here. And so I think of startups in a similar way, that you may have a second office here if you haven't already built up that initial team. But otherwise, I think if you're a smaller team, maybe you just have to jump off and have a leap of faith.
So I have a question or a follow-up on that. Is there a way that you're packaging up soft landing information for startups? Because I know that is a massive concern for a lot of supply chain companies, because if they have grown to a certain scale, I'll reference one company we're doing diligence on that was born out of Princeton's Castle Labs. So they are very much New Jersey-based company. They're still early stage. They've got massive AI edge computing calculations that have taken 25 years at Princeton to develop. And so, but their team is only 2 people. So if they were, and they're already doing deployments with huge enterprise companies, but none of those companies are requiring them to move their 2-person team to their location. So is that a requirement, or is that something that I think it is adding an extra layer of barrier of you being able to get the best of, or just the ones that are willing to move at that early stage and really understanding what's required of them when you say move? Or is there a soft landing office where you can pair them with a counterpart that's local that could be their local rep?
Yeah, I'll give this an answer really quickly, and I think Rosemarie may have a couple of comments as well. So Grit Studios is a perfect example of this. Grit is a co-working space that is specifically dedicated for companies that are enterprise ready, that want to scale into bigger companies. So you may have leads on contracts with the big companies here. Grit is a place for you to have flexible co-working space, short-term leases. You don't have to lock yourself in. And then they also provide you mentorship. The founder of Grit is Rick Webb, who was previously the senior vice president of global operations for Walmart. And so he has a wealth of knowledge and expertise in the retail space for helping companies get in, especially navigating through that initial vendor setup process. And so those are things that I think Rick does really, really fantastic. And I think that there's more examples of that are more specific that other groups are doing, but I think grid is probably the most clear soft landing space, if you will, that you mentioned, that is strategically doing that. Rosemarie, do you have any comments to add? Let me see if I need to unmute you.
Winded a few times just to hear that part. But I wanted to just add that we are working. Did you hear me? What I just said?
Yep.
Okay, good. So we are working with all of frankly, the entire team in Northwest Arkansas to put together a soft landing package, I'll call it, something like that, because probably about 80% of our teams are really thrilled to have the opportunity to be in Northwest Arkansas.
She doesn't live there.
To have the ability to collaborate with other supply chain companies, the University of Arkansas, which has, of course, the best
She does
supply
the money
chain
allocation from the foundation.
There's somebody talking. So basically, the soft landing package, what we're doing also is connecting every single team to very specific mentors that will actually be able to help these new startups or startups that already exist go to Northwest Arkansas and achieve success. What's really great about what was mentioned earlier about JB Hunt was that it is a highly collaborative ecosystem. And frankly, you know, I'm texting with lots and lots of players in Northwest Arkansas every single day. And I cannot tell you that we've had another place-based challenge like this that has been so open with us, making sure we have success on the ground with the new companies that are coming in. So I would just like to thank them for that, but also just want to say that that's something that everyone will have in their hands. Plus, they're going to have 5 days in Northwest Arkansas to meet those mentors, to have an investor forum that will be a world-class investor forum with lots of family offices, super angels, and so on from March 31st to April 4th of next year once we select our finalists. So just want to mention those few things that could be helpful to the conversation.
Yep. I'll say one more point that kind of puts a bow on the venture capital question. Because that problem is so glaring, I think what's very interesting is that there's a high likelihood that you'll see significant change with that problem. In fact, some of the Walton family members are partnering with Steve Case for doing programming in Bentonville, as well as helping welcome in investors from outside the region. And I think if you can look at the pace of growth in terms of support programs that are more programmatic in nature, and the speed in which those have been deployed, I think you can expect to see something similar in terms of capital formation that it's actually bubbling up around these programs too, because there's more throughput for potential deal flow. And so we've already started seeing new venture capital firms forming in Northwest Arkansas, and bridges being built into other ecosystems as well. So let me pause for just 1 second. So Rosemarie points out too that with the investor day that she mentioned, there will be investors coming in from all over the world, places like London and Sweden, and so there really is a wealth of connections that I think are associated with the.
Yeah, we should go on that April 4th date.
I'm going to pause, or I'm going to mute everyone again here. That you can anticipate to continue to build out because of the network connections here. All right, so I'm going to move on just for the sake of time, so I can make sure and get through some of these points. I see that someone had their hand raised. Andrew Mack. Do you still have a question?
Yeah, it's just can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, just a quick question. It was building off of the last one. I've never been to Northwest Arkansas. All the things I've heard are lovely. We're an internationally focused company based in DC with operations mostly outside the US, right? And
Okay.
so I guess that was the question that I had, was about the linkages to the rest of the world and the ability to run things out of Northwest Arkansas that have a reach beyond the US.
Yeah, that's a great question. So here's a mind-blowing statistic. Northwest of residents in Bentonville, Arkansas, where Walmart is headquartered, 62% of the residents here are not from the state of Arkansas. And some of that is indicative of people moving from nearby states. But when you slice the data and look at some of the employees that are working within Walmart, we have a huge significant size population from Indian, Pakistani, and Southeast Asian communities. And so there's quite a bit of in and out travel with those people. So they're officed in Bentonville and representing and coordinating and doing business all over the world on behalf of Walmart. So I think if you pattern match with that, I think it's definitely something that's doable. But then I think the benefit for a startup company looking to engage is that you have a centralized location where you have a company that touches so many parts of the world that it's really easy to connect with people locally here that are plugged in all over the world without you having to travel. And then being able to piggyback off of some of their relationships and connections.
And this is John McKellen from New York. I'd also add the flight connections to Northwest Regional Airport, are extraordinary for an area that size. Of course, it's driven by, by vendors meeting with the various companies there. But I think, and it goes back a while, but, I know 15, 20 years ago, there were two daily nonstops from LaGuardia to there. So I think the access and the mobility to get to and from there is much easier than what one might think.
Yep, we have quite a few direct flights to major international hubs all across the country, directs to San Francisco and New York, like you mentioned. So it is more accessible than most people would realize. All right.
Thanks.
Judy Lee Greenhill, you have your hand raised. We want to make sure I get to you before we move on. If not, then I can move forward. All right, I'm going to mute everyone again. All right, so moving forward, moving through this narrative of Northwest Arkansas being at an inflection point, I'm going to share a few other things that are exciting. So as startup founders, it's important to realize that you have to recruit talent to your region, to the region, to be able to support these startups. And someone asked that question about what it was like to get talent once you do start your company and start to grow. And so I think what we can assert here is that if you look at the amenities and quality of life that's being built here, we have this interesting effect that happens when people have never been to Northwest Arkansas. There's somewhat of a resistance, and there's friction there with a question of why should I be here? And then once they get here and they start realizing some of the things that are being built here, it's a totally different conversation. In fact, it flips quickly to where it's like, how is all this happening? This is incredible. These amenities are world-class. I never would have thought these were here. And so I'm just going to take you through a few examples of what's going on, what has been built, and what you can anticipate to be built. And this is important because if you're thinking about building an office here or moving your startup here, it's good to know that there are things that are really attractive to talent in the region. Like I mentioned earlier, the strategic direction for our bigger companies here is now, how do we get the best talent so that we can recruit the people that we need to help us build these scalable, low cost business models, and supporting those and staying competitive. So I'm going to point out, so top left of my screen right here, and for folks on the phone, I'm sorry, these are beautiful images and I wish you could see them. Hopefully you can come back to the recording later and check it out. But top left of our screen, we have Crystal Bridges Museum of American Art. Crystal Bridges was a museum that was completed in 2011 through a donation from the Walton Family Foundation, a $1.3 billion grant to establish a world-class art museum in the heartland of America, nestled in a backdrop of the Ozarks. And this is where you can find part of Alice Walton's art collection, as well as a phenomenal rotation of some of the best artists in the world. Right now, we have an exhibit that's going on called the North Forest Lights, in partnership with the Moment Factory. If you're in New York, you may have seen Moment Factory in some of the museums up there, but it's turning some heads right now because the exhibit is absolutely incredible. But that museum is something that is definitely an unexpected amenity that when people get here, they're blown away by. And then to the right of the Crystal Bridges photo, we have the Momentary, which is a sister museum for Crystal Bridges that is focused on experimental art at the intersection of multimedia, so multimedia platforms. So think about food, think about sound, think about touch, movement, experimenting with these different mediums and weaving them together. So this museum is going to embody that, and at the same level in terms of the quality and the scope of Crystal Bridges as well. That museum is going to be opening in February of next year. And so if you're here during that time, you're going to get to see quite an amazing museum that's opening. A lot of people are comparing it to like a mass MoCA, if you're familiar with that. And then on the bottom left and right, these are not buildings that are in Bentonville or that will be ever in Bentonville, but they are architectural renderings from some of the concept designs that the architect who will be building a co-working space in Bentonville has designed in the past. So earlier this year, we announced that Bentonville would be getting a WeWork. And this was actually going to be one of the largest WeWorks in the entire country at 200,000 square feet. With a town of 55,000 people, that's a pretty jarring fact. But like I mentioned earlier, we have a high number of companies that need that flexible workspace because they have these client relationships that may need them to staff up really quickly, or maybe they have a lean operation. And then they also want these collaborative spaces. So the WeWork may not be branded WeWork by the time it comes to fruition. We'll see, that may play out. But talking to the developers who are building the building, the vision for what the building will look like and the purpose and intent of the building will still remain the same. And in fact, they already have 70% of this co-working space, this 200,000 square feet, already committed. And so we're pretty certain that it's going to be that it's going to be phenomenal. One of the things I do know that this co-working space will have that ties into some of the biking community that we have here is a wraparound bike path that goes up 5 stories that you can access from the street. It will be handicapped handicap gradient of an incline. And so you can actually ride your bike all the way around the building to retail shops around this co-working space. So this is coming to downtown Bentonville, and the architect is responsible for doing buildings like these on the bottom left and right. The next ones are a few things that are either already in play or in development. So on the top left, we have the 8th Street Market And on the top right, we have Brightwater, which is housed inside of the 8th Street Market. So I mentioned the multimedia experimentation at the Momentary. This building is positioned right next to the Momentary. It is a culinary school that is bringing in some of the top culinary talent. And they have programs that are pushing the limit in terms of innovating in food and supplying workforce to all of the fantastic restaurants that we have here. In fact, we have new restaurants opening every month of all different types of backgrounds, and a lot of the talent that's staffing that is coming out of Brightwater. On the bottom left, we have Theater Squared, which is a performing arts center that's brand new in Fayetteville. Absolutely exquisite venue. On the bottom right, we have a multi-purpose or mixed-use development with retail and housing. And so one of the interesting things that's happening in Northwest Arkansas right now, and I'm going to speak specifically to Bentonville, is that there is a super high demand and low supply of affordable housing. But that won't be the case for long, because we're bringing on over 3,000 units within the next 18 months of places that look like the place on the bottom right. And then moving forward with that, you can also see some of the architectural renderings of other things that are being built out. On the top right here of the presentation, this is another housing complex that is called Red Barn. And Red Barn is a unique approach to living that infuses an urban farm experience. So when you live at Red Barn, you can actually participate in a share crop program, and the crops are grown on the lot here. You can see on the top right of the screen there. So definitely one of those unique experiences. I think it caters towards some millennial tastes in terms of wanting to be connected into nature and the earth. But it's also just a fantastic and absolutely beautiful living space. On the top left, we have a new park that was announced that is being built out in support of the Walton Family Foundation. This is a mixed-use space with tennis courts, lots of walking areas, and you can kind of see just the beauty that sticks out. On the bottom left, we have a new development on the riverfront in Springdale, Arkansas, all brand new. And then on the bottom right, we have the House of Songs program, which is a music program that brings in people of different backgrounds and eclectic taste in music on a fellowship to live and commute and commune together with artists from all over the world. So you can think of this as a way to create lateral connections in terms of music taste and genre bending opportunities. Let me stop here for a second because I've seen some questions come through. All right, let me check the chat.
Hi, Jordan.
Yes.
Hello.
Yes,
Jordan,
I'm
this
here.
is Judy Lee Greenhill. I was wondering
Hey.
whether you can speak a little bit about the resources and support for minority woman-owned small business in terms of funding resources and mentorship.
Yes, that's a fantastic question. So I can't speak to every organization, but most of our entrepreneurial support organizations have diversity metrics baked into their operational metrics. So for example, Startup Junkie being one of those organizations has specific metrics on making sure to meet the demands of the growing population of female founders in the region. And then more specifically, I mentioned earlier the program called Venture Noir, which is a program that focuses on supporting entrepreneurs of color. However, that is not an exclusive program. It is absolutely inclusive to everyone. And a lot of their programming is geared around being an underrepresented founder. So the marketing of Venture Noir may speak to the Black community, but a lot of their programming.
What about the Asian? Yeah. What about the Asian community?
Yeah, so there aren't any specific programs geared toward just the Asian community, but the Asian community is one of our largest minority demographics. So like I mentioned earlier in Bentonville, there's a large number of Southeast Asians, East Asian, and Indian and Pakistani people living here. And that number, I think, is around 10% of the population in Bentonville. So quite a significant amount. I think that that population is definitely integrated into our startup programming, but there are not specific programs targeted for those groups, at least yet.
What about the Chinese community? What's that like in Arkansas?
Yeah. So the Chinese community is definitely included in that statistic of East Asians. In terms of community presence, we do have, so there is some work to be done in terms of breaking out some of these communities. What we found is that, I think the Indian community is probably more indicative of this, but some of the communities that are here for doing business with Walmart are somewhat siloed. So they do tend to have their own little communities within themselves, which I think has its benefits and some downfalls to that. One benefit is that there is a strong sense of embracing and maintaining the individual cultures of those people, and there is support and encouragement in the community. I know you asked specifically about Chinese community, but like for example, in the Indian community here, there are significant amount of events that are dedicated to the Indian population. I can't specifically speak to the Chinese population, but I do know that is one of our bigger demographics.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right. Let's see, let me make sure I don't have any text coming through. And I think there's another resource that I just remembered for specifically women that's called Company Club. And it's a new organization. It hasn't launched yet, but it is a co-working / community center for female entrepreneurs. And that should be launching here in the next few months. I wish I knew more information about that program, but what I can do is connect with the people who are building that program. And Judy, I can connect you directly to them if you'd like.
Absolutely. Thank you so much.
And I've got one more question.
Yes, please. If you can send me the information, I appreciate it. Thank you, Jordan.
Yes, absolutely. Okay, so I'm going to end our presentation on a quick video because I've mentioned a lot of these things that are being built out, and it is important to consider how you're going to recruit talent and what Walmart and the other companies here are doing to build the ecosystem is absolutely doing that. So the number here is 28 people per day are moving to Northwest Arkansas. And that's because of the pull from the larger companies, but also the companies that are supporting those companies. And it's not just by magic or by money. It's the fact that this place is a wonderful place to live, that these companies are being able to staff up and increase their capacity here and really do well doing business here. And that trend is only going to continue to improve and get better. In fact, A lot of the folks that I talk to that are at the helm in terms of making decisions on investment in the community, communicate it in terms of their vision for the community, that if you think what we've done so far is special, just wait till what you see in the next 5 years. And I think what I'm about to show you is an interesting example of that, as just one small component of what this community is going to look like and how it's going to transform. So this is, if you haven't seen it, this is the Walmart home office plans that will be finished by 2025. But one of the things to consider as you're watching this is that this is not just for Walmart only. This is for our entire community, because they are intentionally building space where people can collaborate and work alongside of Walmart or with Walmart, or maybe just you're a part of the community and you want to enjoy the amenities that they're building out. All of these things will be accessible to the community here. And all of this stuff is in relatively short distance of each other. A lot of the museums that I mentioned are within walking distance of this. And then if you're in other cities throughout Northwest Arkansas, it's a pretty short drive compared to other metro areas. And so here we go with the Walmart home office plans. So you can see there's a lot of room for green space. That was something very intentional that they've made sure to include in the plans, thinking about the well-being of employees and the well-being of the community. So as I mentioned earlier, that Spartan approach that permeated throughout the whole ecosystem, if you were to look at some of the older, more traditional buildings that Walmart and some of the other companies have, it's very common to see buildings that have no windows and look very reminiscent of a warehouse. And so Walmart and the other companies truly understand that you have to think about the people first. And these plans are with that in mind and placed at the priority. And also making sure that they're doing good for the community. And I think if you look at Walmart's strategy and if you look at all the company's strategy in terms of keeping up with innovation, part of that strategy is to make sure that they're in tune with the startup ecosystem, not only just paying attention to what's being developed, but actively making investments into the community and the startups that are being homegrown. These companies would way rather invest in companies that are homegrown, that can scale up here, than have to acquire something and manage the process of trying to merge cultures once those companies have grown to a certain level and possibly in other areas outside of this region. And so as we've seen all of these different entrepreneurial support programs that have popped up, that's another big driving factor, is that we know that organic growth for the startup community is going to be more sustainable, and it's also going to help the existing business ecosystem. And we know that overall it's going to drive success for everyone. Rosemarie just asked, do we have scooters? Yes, we have scooters. We'll probably have more scooters in the next several months. And we will also have a bike share program, which brings me to a good point that I didn't really dive super deep into here, but Northwest Arkansas is a place that is known for biking. And so piggybacking off of the visuals that you just saw from Walmart home office, the goal of this building too is to make it inclusive in the community, but also to fulfill a commitment to have 10% of Walmart's workforce commuting through micro mobility options on a daily basis. So if you do the numbers, Walmart has roughly anywhere between right now 20 to 30,000 people working in the region. And so if you did the numbers on that, that's 3,000 people potentially commuting a day via bike. And so there's this incredible movement to invest in the biking infrastructure here. We have 1.5 miles of trail being built every single day, or not every single day, every single week. And and those are both paved trails and off-road mountain biking trails, gravel trails, to provide many options for people to either commute to work, enjoy rides, and all of these are connecting all of the cities as well. So, you know, Northwest Arkansas is a cluster of 5 cities, really. So if you look at Bella Vista, Bentonville, Rogers, Springdale, and Fayetteville, all of those 5 cities that are clustered along the interstate are also accessible on one biking greenway. So you can travel from the north side of the I-70 corridor and ride a bike all the way down to South Fayetteville, which is the south side of the corridor. And you know, it's just a remarkable example of what's being built out here. So, you know, if you're in the micro-mobility space, I think it's a good time to be here because we're looking for more options to help meet those demands. Or if you just enjoy riding to work, you can expect to see things like that when you're here. All right, so I have time for a few more questions, and then I think we'll wrap it up. That's the end of my presentation. Rosemarie, do you have anything specifically that I need to touch on, or any additional questions? Let's see. I don't know which number you are to unmute. I'll unmute all. If everyone can please just be silent for just a moment. I'm going to unmute everyone so we can hear Rosemarie.
Actually, I think I figured it'd be $700 and some, so it's a little less than half, and that's always a good thing.
All right, Rosemarie, are you there?
Yes, I'm here. Thank you.
Okay.
Oh,
All right.
Oh, gosh.
Anything else we need to touch on?
Yeah, just a couple things. Ooh. Sorry.
Okay, I think we have you back.
Okay, is that better?
Yes.
Okay, sorry about that. I apologize. I was watching your slides, and I had you on both venues. I wanted to mention a few things because I know some of the people on the phone that are have a crazy time parking. It can cost $20 to $40 to park a day, and also, as you showed, you can bike to work, you get scooter to work. The roads are, I mean, to get from one place to another, it's very easy and it's very friendly because of the way you've actually developed it. And I think it's very smart because you've developed it over time and expanded it where necessary. So I wanted just to highlight the parking situation, the road situation, because the people on the phone live in very expensive ecosystems where, frankly, it's very difficult to live because of the enormous expense, and everywhere you go, there's more cost. But it would be interesting, Jordan, for you to, you know, I mean, there's all these hidden costs everywhere you go when you live in a city, and like I said, parking and tolls and things of that nature, which Northwest Arkansas does not have. And I'm sure, you know, I'm wondering, what are the plans for things like tolls, and what gets you excited when you think about the things you save every day, because you're not commuting 7 miles, which goes an hour and a half and has tolls and things of that nature. So I would love your opinion.
Yeah, so I actually think this is a fantastic question, and it's one of the things that gives Northwest Arkansas a tremendous advantage in the long run, is that as a metro area, we don't have a downtown core, which in the short term is maybe a disadvantage because we lack a little bit of the density that we may compare ourselves to in places like Austin, Texas, or Raleigh, North Carolina. But in the long run, because we have these 5 different cities that each have their own downtown cores, each of these downtowns are being developed and invested in to provide a incredible quality of life and access to live, work, and play. And it's definitely not an even investment. I think Bentonville gets, or at least in the past 4 or 5 years, has gotten a little bit more of that traction in terms of downtown investment. But because of the spread out nature, so you have Fayetteville, Springdale, Rogers, Bentonville, each of which are about a 8-mile to 10-mile distance from each other. They each have their own little concentric circles that they're kind of expanding from. So instead of having, say like in Austin, having this dense downtown urban core that gets super developed and then raises prices up, and then you have all this traffic from people trying to commute into there. You have these 5 cities that are spread out, that you can feasibly set up office in one of the downtown cores in one of them and live next to it, and the cost isn't going to be as high as it were if you lived in a city with a huge urban core that has that super high density. Over time, we know we will see the density accumulate, but I think the effect that the rate in which that effect happens is going to be much more slower and sustainable for the region as a whole. And then just to put things in context, I think folks in Northwest Arkansas get a little spoiled because they like to talk about how bad the traffic can be sometimes. But we're talking about somebody complaining about a 25-mile drive that takes them 30 minutes. That's what somebody would consider a bad traffic situation here. So you're talking about a 35-mile stretch from one side of Northwest Arkansas to the other, and it only takes you about 35 to 40 minutes. And even on a bad day, the max you're going to see from one end to the other of the metro area is about an hour. So it's incredibly easy to get around. I think in terms of future planning, the biking infrastructure is a big part of that plan. As crazy as it sounds, I think it really is a priority for the municipalities here to prioritize building things like dedicated bike lanes to allow people to use those as means of modes of transportation. And then I think the highway department has done a pretty good job thus far of making sure to build out infrastructure. And thus far they've kept up with the pace of growth pretty well. So just to touch on the cost of living too, can y'all see my screen still? Let's see, make sure I have it. Yeah, so I have a cost of living calculator set up here. Let's see, so let's do a quick experiment. Zach, you have your hand raised. So before we get to your question, I'm going to take a shot in the dark, and I'm going to ask you to tell me where you're from, and we're going to use your location as a proxy for looking at the comparison for cost of living.
Well, I think you may have chosen the wrong guy here.
Okay.
We moved from New York to just outside Charlotte, North Carolina, in about 18 months ago. So we've already had reverse sticker shock, as well as been living in a friendly community where people you don't even know say hi to you. So you might want to talk to somebody that hasn't fled New York yet.
Yeah, so let me just try it anyway. So right now on this cost of living index calculator, I have a comparison between what a $200,000 annual salary in Manhattan versus Bentonville would look like. So if you were making $200,000 in Manhattan, that's the same as making $70,000 in Bentonville. Now let's do, you said Charlotte?
Charlotte, yeah. We're just outside Charlotte.
I'll just take a whack at it. So we're still better. So $200,000 in Charlotte would be the same as making 170. So you're 170 $3,000 are going to go just as far as you making $200,000 in Charlotte.
Sounds to me like it's better to live in Bentonville.
So I took a shot in the dark, and I think that worked. So now that we've gotten past that part, Zach, do you have another question?
Yeah, I have a question. Where's the closest level 1 trauma center?
So I believe Mercy Hospital. Yeah, so we have 3 regional hospitals that have trauma centers. It depends on, and it also depends on which city you're in. So we could break it down by county. You have Benton County, which is in the north, and Washington County, which is in the south. Washington County has Washington Regional Medical Center. So that's where Fayetteville is. And then in Benton County, you have both Mercy Hospital and Northwest Health have trauma centers. And those are both located in Rogers, which is like dead smack in the middle of Benton County. So from where I sit right now, it's about a 10-minute drive to both of those locations.
Outstanding. Thank you.
Yep. All right. Does anyone else have any questions? All right. Well, with that, I thank you all for your time. It's a pleasure to connect and engage with you. If anyone needs to connect further, you can find me at jcarlisle@greaterbentonville.com, and I'm going to throw that in the chat channel. And then I'll also make sure that if anyone needs that, Rosemary can share it as well.
Hey, Jordan.
Yes.
I do have one question.
Okay.
How are the schools in regards to K through 12?
That's a great question. You just set up a T-ball for me. So Northwest Arkansas has 7 schools that are all in the top 10% of schools nationwide in a population of 500,000 people. One of those schools, Haas Academy, is the number 7 school in the entire country, and that's a K through 12 school. In the state, I think the Bentonville School District ranks in the top 50 in terms of school districts in the country. And then if you look at the state of Arkansas, all the top 1 through 5 of the schools are all within like a few miles of each other in Northwest Arkansas. In addition to that, there's a few new schools coming online. One of which worth mentioning is a school called the Thaden School. It is a charter school that focuses on project-based learning, that has brought in a talented cast of people from all over the country to run the school. It is on a adjusted income basis for tuition. So it is accessible to anyone who gets admitted from a cost perspective. And they have a unique program that is that teaches you history, economics, politics through the lens of project-based learning with what they call meals, reels, and wheels. And so you learn history and culture through food, through aviation history, through biking history, and through movie history, which sounds really bizarre. But if you think about it, if you think about the way that wheels have impacted society throughout history, you can find examples of how you can stem different bodies of knowledge off of that, whether it's the economics or the politics or whatever, that helps people build a meaningful relationship with the knowledge. So I'm getting a little bit off on a tangent, but I wanted to explain that because I think it's an example of some of the unique education opportunities that are here for K through 12.
Thank you very much for answering my question.
All right. Zach, is your hand still raised from earlier, or is this a new question?
No, it's I probably forgot to take it down. Keep rolling.
All right.
Jordan,
All right.
can you
Yes.
hear me?
Yep.
So it's Marie. So it's just, I know that we're way over time.
No,
but,
we're good. I got time.
Okay. So one other thing that I personally enjoy is the gym. And by the way, I did go to your gyms while I was in Northwest Arkansas. I went to a couple of them. And I want to highlight something else that was not highlighted tonight. So I personally am addicted to very hot, spicy food. So if anyone on the call is also addicted, then they accommodate me. They don't think I'm just a normal American woman. They actually made it as hot as humanly possible, which I was really happy about, but that's a different thing. The gyms. So, Lifetime Fitness is a fabulous fitness club in the area where I live. And I didn't really see very many of those big gyms out there. And so I was just wondering if there's anything going on in the gym area. Of course, Walmart, they may have their own gyms. But Lifetime Fitness is my personal favorite. And just was wondering if you have any efforts to increase the number of awesome gyms.
Yes. I'm trying to find the website for One Fitness, which would be the closest, I think it's either One Fitness or Fitness One, would be the closest equivalent to a Lifetime gym up here. It's a newer gym franchise that's really high end, but also affordable. And there are several locations throughout Northwest Arkansas here.
Oh, awesome.
So if you can see my screen, if not, it's fine.
Oh, yeah, it's beautiful.
Yeah, it's beautiful space. And let's see where their locations are. So Fayetteville, and then they're building another one they have the one in Lowell, which is Rogers technically. And I think I've heard that they have plans to do another one. So if you like spaces like that, that's coming. There's also, a pretty good wellness community here. I think that's definitely a value that you can feel within, the downtown living spaces is wellness as a priority. And so I think there is a healthy number of boutiques and yoga studios and CrossFit gyms or functional movement gyms, massage parlors and everything like that. So there's pretty good access to stuff like that.
I went to these special gyms that were the boutique gyms, and they were fantastic. They didn't torture me. They tortured me with my routine, which is good, but they didn't torture me with, not doing, everything perfectly well, because some people can do it better than me. So then I have one last thing to tell everybody on the call, which, and please do not judge me for this, but there's an organization called Revolution that exists in Arkansas and Texas only. And they have Bloody Mary mix. And the best Bloody Mary mix I've ever tasted in my whole life is called Bloody Revolution Garlic. And I can't get it in DC. So now I'm going to have to get Jordan or somebody to send me some or something, or I have to go there and put a case of it in my suitcase. But in any case, there are things that are going on in the culinary space in Arkansas, Northwest Arkansas in particular, because it's where I bought it, it's not going on anywhere else. Very, very wonderful experimentation that's producing amazing results.
Yeah, we I believe the number is 8. We have 8 Michelin star restaurants in Northwest Arkansas, which is pretty good for a population of our size.
So Jordan,
so food is definitely a big thing. Yeah, go ahead.
No, there's just 2 more things, 2 small things. If you don't mind spending 1 minute on the fashion supply chain and how that's evolving, and also the AI, because a lot of people on the call are in the fashion. We have 3. We have more than 3 groups, but AI is very big. Fashion's big too on this call, and food. And then there's broadly speaking platforms on the call also. But if you could just touch on very briefly the the wonderful things you have going on in the fashion supply chain, the food supply chain, and general, broadly speaking.
Yeah. So in the fashion supply chain world, there's not. We don't have super strong programming totally dedicated to that yet. I love that Lisa is on this call because we need more people like her engaged in this community who are passionate about disrupting that ecosystem, because there is absolutely an untapped potential here to develop really scalable solutions for supply chain. But what you do have is a lot of spin-off talent for people who have worked in merchandising and retail that have been able to successfully scale up and leverage talent from the region to build direct-to-consumer brands that may not necessarily tie back into the Walmart ecosystem, but that are definitely benefiting from the skill sets and the talent that's here. I do think that this community has a appetite for high fashion. So the Northwest Arkansas Fashion Week is something that was started several years ago that celebrates just that. I'm not the right person to talk to about this though. So maybe Jeanette can answer some of those questions, some of that question.
Lovely. Thank you.
And then let's see. Gary asked about taxes. I'm just going to send, because that can get complicated, I'm going to just send the website from the Arkansas Economic Development Commission that has breakdowns of that. And another interesting thing to consider with that, because it's a nuanced topic, is that because y'all are startup founders, there are likely tax incentives that you can gain or tax credits you can gain. And so it's not as straightforward as saying, here's what your income tax is going to look like, or here's what your capital gains would look like if you're a business owner, or whatever specific tax you're talking about. So I have that slide up here, and I'll shoot it in chat, but then I'll also send it to Rosemary afterwards. And then all right. I think I got, so Gary asked about smart cities. I think you can look at what Walmart is planning with their campus and think of that as its own city in some regard. And there will be it will be a smart enabled campus. With something that's that open, with a company that big, you can bet that there's going to be things like that. And there is an interest for supporting innovation like that because of how the IoT space plays into logistics, and how there's a lot of portable ideas that come from the distribution. Distribution centers as a primary example, where you need sensors to be able to track a lot of stuff. You could apply a lot of that same technology to the way people are moving around a city or monitoring certain things. So I definitely think there's some competency there. Yeah. Oh, and then Rosemary, I just remembered you asked about AI. Is that right?
Yes, I did.
Yeah. I am running out of time, but I'm going to quickly give you a perspective on this. So I was one of the organizers of the Northwest Arkansas Technology Summit, which is the largest tech summit and technology summit or tech event in the state of Arkansas. And we had an overwhelming number of sponsors that are in the AI space interested in sponsoring our event, to establish a stronger relationship with Walmart, and Tyson and JB Hunt, but the predominant theme was Walmart. And and that's an interesting indicator for how these companies see opportunity to service Walmart, and specifically help provide value in the AI space as Walmart goes through this digital transformation process. Walmart has, Walmart has really pioneered a lot of the software systems for supply chain. That may be to their own, maybe to their own detriment at this point, because they were one of the first, and now they're getting outpaced a little bit. But there's such an appetite for them to continue to invest in that, and you're definitely seeing that with the interest of these vendors. So in their region, there's about 30 companies that some of, probably half of which are Fortune 500 companies that all have AI competencies. So these are companies like Cognizant, IBM, Deloitte, Palantir, ThoughtSpot, Snowflake, and the list could go on and on. But there's a good list of companies that have anywhere between a staff of 5 to 100 people that are all here, and there's an increasing demand of that AI talent. And then something new that has just been developed, actually 2 new things. One is a dedicated program for data science, machine learning, and artificial intelligence at the U of A in partnership with Walmart and Tyson and JB Hunt. And then to pair with that, there's a new state-backed program called the Arkansas Academy for Data Science. And they're providing apprenticeship programs for companies that, apprenticeship funding for companies that need to hire more data scientists. So if you're a company that has some AI component and you need to hire a junior level data scientist, or train up a junior level data scientist to become a senior level data scientist for you, there's actually funding out there to pay for that person's apprenticeship while they go through a period of 12 to 18 months. So the state will actually pay for that person to receive training from your company as they're on the job working with you. So that's an interesting program that I think has a lot of promise and potential.
That's fabulous.
Yeah,
it's a fabulous program. My gosh.
Yeah, and so like there is I mean, you think about Walmart, like there is such an opportunity to unlock the data that they generate, and so it's drawn in some of this. It's almost like sharks, like looking at chum in the water. Like they're looking at this opportunity and aggressively attacking it, trying to fill the void where Walmart may need help with some of these data science competencies to compete on a global level. So it's definitely an interesting time to kind of be in that space. Okay, last question. What about the blockchain ecosystem? So on a personal note, my wife is actually the managing director of the Blockchain Center of Excellence at the University of Arkansas. It was one of the first public universities to establish a blockchain dedicated program at the university. And that's a cool program because they're partnering with what Walmart's doing with their food supply chain. So they work with the IBM Food Trust, and you probably read the headlines a couple of years ago where Walmart was able to use a blockchain to pinpoint the exact source of a outbreak in some spoiled cabbage or something. So the companies here are still working in that space and investing resources in that. And in a similar way that the supporting vendors for these big companies are, chomping at the bit to provide their AI expertise. I think that was the same case for blockchain, like maybe 2 years ago, but there's still a desire for that, and there's still a need for that, but I don't think it's quite as intense as it was a couple of years ago. But I think that in the long run, that technology still has a lot of nascent potential, and you will see maybe a reemergence of the significance of blockchain for the bigger companies. And hopefully the U of A is well positioned to be able to, be a leader in that category.
Thank you very much, Jordan. You have gone above and beyond the call of duty and have provided a plethora of information. And I'm going to encourage everyone to re-listen to this, to this recorded session, along with the video and the audio. And I don't know if anyone else, I would say thank you very, very, very much for your insights. And, I'm looking at housing in Northwest Arkansas right now. I hope everybody on the phone is.
It's a great place to be.
Yeah, it is. So have a great night, everyone. And thank you, Jordan. And Jordan, we'll be sending through some information about how to contact Jordan. And also this information that we have here. And we'll also try to tie together all of the links to all the resources that Jordan provided tonight. And I wish you a good night. Thank you very much.
Thanks a lot, Jordan. It was great.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, Jordan.
Have a good evening.
Thank you, Jordan.
Thank you, Jordan. Thanks, Rosemary.
Thanks,
Oh,
Rosemary.
you're welcome.